Thornton. With me are Councilmember Aya Falcone and Councilmember Helene Schneider. And today we are continuing with our review of the budget process for fiscal year 2008 and 8-9. And Mr. Samario, would you lead us off?
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We are covering two topics today. We'll be starting with a presentation from both Parks and Recreation and the police departments on youth programs. And that'll be followed by a presentation from Public Works Department staff on their street circulation, transportation funding, and projects. Just as a reminder, this is the fourth of the four meetings we set aside for the Finance Committee to review various topics of the recommended budget for 2009. Next Tuesday, we will be looking at, as the final meeting, on May 20th, the potential impacts of state, county, and school district on general fund budget and police fire operations, as well as the Park Forest Use program. So with that, I will just turn it over to Sarah, who will be talking about the Parks and Recreation youth programs.
So I talked to Sarah a little bit before the meeting, and I think what we would like to do is this is a three-part presentation. And if committee members would just make a note of your questions, we'll stop after each of the three parts and give a chance for questions at that time, and then we'll proceed with the next section. So, Sarah, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, council members. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about city programs and how they affect the lives of youth and teens in our community. And as Roger said, we will be moving from the Park and Recreation programs to Police Activities League and Police Department programs, and then Jim Armstrong will follow up at the end with a bit about the Youth Strategy Committee and how that is progressing. I wanted to give you an update of how we spent and utilized the funds and some of the improvements we made to youth programs in the fiscal year 2008 budget process. It was very important at the development of that. Council members noted that we needed to put some more funding into the programs for youth, and that we did. Because of that, $13,000 was added to fund a full site at Ortega Park Welcome House for summer drop-in program, and also to expand the services at McKinley, Harding, and Franklin school sites to full-day services. So they went from 9:30 to till 5 o'clock. So with those added hours and increased sites, we were able to increase our summer drop-in use by 30%. So it went from around 360 to about 437 participants over the course of the summer. So fully money well spent, and opportunity to kids for right in their neighborhood to have something healthy, supervised activities to do. Also, the council members felt it was important to really look at the after-school programs, and one of the things we did was eliminate all the fees for our 10 elementary school sport leagues. This resulted in an increase of 81% increased participation at the fields. And, you know, the kids that were being turned away previously were the ones that most needed these programs. So we are really happy with the results from that. This is a year-to-date factor, so it could show an increase even to the end of the year when we finish our programs. The third thing that we did this year successfully is with the Santa Barbara School District, met with the Board of Education and floated the idea of being able to bring partners and collaborators onto campuses under the umbrella of the Park and Recreation Department and through our joint use agreement. To date, we have 3 new partners, PAL being one of the major partners that we're bringing on campuses. We are still in the development stages with them. It's in its infancy. We expect the programs to go, but we really want to expand beyond the sport leagues we have to add enrichment programs, art programs, other programs that are of interest to teens. So we're working hard on that, and we'll continue to do so. We've been meeting regularly with Dr. Sarvis and Mr. Turnbull, and we will be meeting with the principals throughout the summer to really try to streamline the program and make it a win-win for everyone after school there. All 3 of these programs will be continuing through fiscal year 2009. As far as teen programs, just a little happy notes here. we had the 1-year anniversary of 1235. We had a week-long open house. Many new teens came that week. Our membership level is up to about 300 youth regularly. There are other youth that drop in occasionally. In a minute, I'll be telling you about some new opportunities that we're going to be having there. But the 1235 is running very well. We do want to look at better outreach, and we've been looking at our marketing to improve the outreach and really hit some of the different pockets within the city of kids that may not normally go to the teen center. So we're looking at our marketing, and that's an important focus for this coming year. Also, the social host ordinance was brought forward by the ADAP Coalition Alcohol and Drug Prevention Program, the grant-funded program. We've proposed it to City Council, who approved the draft to go forward to the Ordinance Committee. We do intend to bring that back to you to the Ordinance Committee in June, and then as quickly as possible after that to bring it back to City Council to have some movement on that. We recently hosted a job shadow event with Santa Barbara High School where 40 students participated with about 28 staff in a half-day program. They came and had a presentation at City Hall that Jim Armstrong and Tom Jaime presented. And then they went out in teams to the different departments. And it was a very successful program that day. When the kids left, they were kind of in a somber kind of mood. But when they returned, you could tell they had really learned about a lot about the city, were enthusiastic about spending time with city staff, and likewise the city staff were just so thrilled with doing it. So for a first-time event, it was very successful, and we look forward to doing it maybe perhaps once or 2 times in the next year, and maybe having a different high school chosen to come in the following year. We have had 2 youth speakouts this year, one just recently last week. They have focused on teen alcohol and drug use and ways to look for solutions to that, and for teens to voice their opinions on why it happens and possible solutions in our community. The most recent speak out also included the county indicators. It was hosted with Fighting Back. We're seeing that drug, alcohol, and amphetamine use is on the rise, especially in the younger ages in the 7th grade area, and that the county norm is higher than the state average. So it was well attended. About 170 people came. It was a real great opportunity to see a mix of nonprofits, parents, and youth all getting together to discuss a common topic. So that was one of the highlights for teen programs for this year. And then to kind of end the season of this year, we do annually host a youth leadership banquet. It will be on June 2nd. Area agencies that serve youth are invited to nominate a youth that is inspiring, that provides leadership, that is encouraging to other youth in their community. And it's a really interesting event because you get to learn a lot about youth that are doing positive things in our community. So really a nice focus. I think you've all received invitations too, so I'm hoping about that. Something new for next year. This was something of a department priority, but was not funded last year. It was kind of a concept that we wanted to explore, and it's called Fun on the Run. It's a mobile recreation van that moves to the underserved neighborhoods, East Side, West Side, Lower West Side, in those areas that are densely populated and further away from schools and parks and areas where it's safe to have recreation. We were able to obtain a grant from the Santa Barbara Foundation to fund the van, and PAL has generously stepped up to help equip the van. And we are working towards having a beginning date in July 2008 of this year. And what the van would do would move around from different sites in those neighborhoods and do street games, arts and crafts, have special events, and encourage neighbors to know each other, and for neighbors to know children in their neighborhood, and for them to be more of a camaraderie of the neighborhood, and to bring services to the youth that may not be able to walk to recreation services or may not be able to afford them. So we're really looking forward to that kicking off. in order to identify the sites, we're kind of going through a little bit of a process because we do want to look at the neighborhoods that are densely populated, perhaps near housing authority properties that have families, that are away from schools and parks, that we want to avoid areas that have high traffic flow, that have public transportation. You know, we have to consider the street sweeping program. But we're gathering a group of knowledgeable staff and some others from the community, from the police department, housing authority, transportation, streets, and a few of the advisory committee members from the West Side, Lower West Side, and Franklin advisory committees to come together to look at an overview of the city and try to narrow down to about 10 sites and do a site selection. After that, we will bring it back to the joint when the three advisory committees meet as a joint group in June, we would have them kind of narrow it down to 5 sites. And we intend to go to 1 site per day for half of a day or after school, depending on what time of year it is. So, oh, yeah, Nancy. So part of the difficulty is it wasn't a funded program, but we felt it was a very important department priority. And since we received the funding for the van and for the equipment, in the early stages of budget development, we were able to eke out through new revenues an additional about $29,000 for vehicle replacement and maintenance, for fuel, and for also salaries. This amount funds about 3 days per week, and we have already put together kind of a marketing campaign to go out to community members, businesses, and otherwise that would like to sponsor another day of the week or, you know, sponsor a portion of the program so that we can expand our services to 5 days a week. I think it will be well received in the community, and I think it won't be a very hard sell. The van itself is going to be colorful and lively. It will be bilingual. It would also indicate our sponsors on the sides of the van so that the neighborhood, you know, knows that they're being supported by the city and the community. New for teen programs this coming year. We were also likewise able to apply for Santa Barbara Foundation grants for programs, and we did receive 2. One is called the Healthy Options for Teens. It will be a program that was hosted at the 1235 Teen Center, and it will have different segments that have to do with having healthy lifestyles, healthy snacks, how to cook nutritionally, outdoor activities, yoga, dance, Pilates, and a whole host of different activities that would run through the week. So we're very happy to start that up. Hopefully that'll bring in a different type of teen, or maybe it will support a teen that is there that wants to change his lifestyle or her lifestyle. So we're looking forward to that. And then also the Youth Alliance for the Arts. This is a program that had been going on at the Franklin Center. We're looking to continuing it at the Ortega Welcome House, and it kind of started initially as the mural restoration program, and then we kind of expanded upon that a little bit. But what it will be doing is teaching art skills that also help entrepreneurial opportunities. For instance, helping kids learn digital design so they can design and do silk screening for T-shirts or other products for urban and street style clothing. Also, we're looking at developing more youth art so we could have art exhibits, have a website where they could sell their art, maybe do a youth art magazine. So it's kind of it'll evolve as we find vendors that can help us, but we're looking at the community to bring in different vendors that can teach different elements that both are creative and art related, but also that can be used as an entrepreneurial opportunity for those kids that want to go there. We will, like I said, be moving into the Ortega Welcome House, which has a renovation plan for this fall, a CDBG-funded renovation. So we're going to start the program at Franklin and then move to the Ortega Welcome House in the fall after that renovation's complete. And then the third thing that we're going to be doing this year that's new is having a council job shadow day. This is something Roger wanted to do, and we're looking forward to it. I've been working with Alejandra Gutierrez, the career tech from Santa Barbara High School. She did the job shadow program for us, but we thought it would be really an interesting thing to have youth that are in leadership and government classes actually pair up with a council member, go to their meetings in the morning, and perhaps we'll go to the afternoon council meeting on a Tuesday and perhaps sit at the dais, but really get a feel for what it's like to be in city government. So we're planning that for fall. We haven't set a date, but you'll be hearing more about it. And then lastly, just a bit of an update on the Youth Apprentice Program. Last summer, we did place 22 youth in city hourly positions. 15 youth were placed in private employment. To date, 7 of the youth that were placed in city programs are still being retained, library, parks and recreation, etc. Many of the youth move on or go back to school or move on to other jobs too. So this, the numbers may not work out right, but they all move on to other opportunities as well. But we do have city 6 hourlies that were retained from last summer. Right now, we've also secured 14 new jobs in hourly positions within the city. We really appreciate the support of Jim in asking department heads to find hourly opportunities. We did, at our last supervisor-manager quarterly meeting, had presentations both by the Youth Apprentice Program and SARE as far as opportunities and how to mentor a youth and why should you hire a youth, and to encourage people to do so. It is for some, you may not be hired the most skilled youth that could take the position, but taking a little bit of a risk goes a long way. And truthfully, anytime we've hired a youth in these types of situations, they more than exceed our expectations in learning and effort and their work ethic. So it's a really positive program. SARE, who we were working with, that's Workforce Investment Board funded grant, is at 4 of our sites around town, city sites. They have placed 11 participants to date in area businesses and nonprofits, and they are working with 69 clients. It's a 3-year program where education is also a big emphasis of the program. So we meet with them regularly, and we will be giving you updates regularly on their progress. And then I wanted to turn it over to Nancy Rapp, who wanted to talk a bit about the Community Youth Strategy Job Coordination.
Good afternoon. Just very quickly, Jim is going to be giving you an overview of the Community Youth Strategy Group and what they're doing. But I wanted to just share with you that Parks and Recreation is playing a role. As you know, we've been really beating the bushes and trying to get more job opportunities identified for youth. We also have a lot of youth-serving organizations that are identifying youth that need jobs. So in the short term, until a longer program can be identified, we're going to play that role of being the umbrella. So we are going to reorganize within our existing staff, and for a short term, a dedicated position to work with Antonio that will help do the outreach so that we are a single depository of job opportunities, and then also for where the youth are being referred to. So we will not be doing all the placements, but for instance, we may help youth identified by a youth-serving organization or someone in the community be referred to Trade Art. And we may do the same for instance, I just got an email list of a number of local businesses that were interested in having a youth intern work with them. But nobody is there to follow that up and put that information out there. So we'll be that coordinating role. So we're in the process of developing how that will work. at least for the summer, which is the most important part right now, is to just get it all kick-started. So wanted you to know that we're going to be taking on that focus. And that's our report. If you have any questions.
Jim, did you want to mention anything about the? Okay, well then, this is a point when our committee members can ask questions. Falcone, Ms. Schneider.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Couple of questions. The mobile van, which is a great idea, and I'm really glad that PAL is helping out with that, but PAL is doing an awful lot of things, which we're going to hear in a few minutes. Did the Park Foundation, I seem to remember there was some involvement with the van at the Park Foundation with respect to funds. Can you refresh my memory on that, please?
The grant went through the Park Foundation to secure the van, but I think also what you might be recalling is that although the Park Foundation didn't do something formally in terms of funding the program, we had several board members who very graciously made personal donations to support the program. And those funds have gone towards the equipment and the operation of the program. But we are going to be undertaking a full community campaign, as Ms. Hanna mentioned.
Great, okay. And the places where the van goes, you mentioned targeting in particular ways certain neighborhoods. I'm wondering whether or not you are, within your focus, actually considering the high gang-involved neighborhoods, specifically the parks, where a lot of activity occurs, coordinating with the police department, because quite frankly my next question is going to go to the internships and the activities, the apprenticeships, and what the target population is for that. And actually maybe Mr. Armstrong is going to enlighten me on that a little bit. But these are the neighborhoods. I mean, the West Side Center, if the kids can get to the West Side Center, they don't need the van there. So it's this other focus that I'm particularly concerned about and want you to think about.
Yes, Councilmember Falcone, that is what we're looking towards. You know, the back streets and some of the side alleys and maybe some of the cul-de-sacs that are maybe less safe
Exactly.
for our youth, to take back their neighborhoods and make them safe, playful areas to be. Mm-hmm. So we are looking at those. Police will be involved with the site selections. Mm-hmm. Both because if we decide to block off a street, they have to know about it, but also they know the neighborhoods and they know where the impact is, and the kids that are, you know, don't have idle hands. So we are going to be definitely using them as a resource because they know the neighborhoods. But another point that you maybe didn't mean to make, but the vans can also be used as outreach for social services and referrals.
Well, exactly.
And
yeah. I mean, that's a
finding
conduit to
yes.
other services.
We also are looking at having the bookmobile come with us to sites, and also the health mobile come to different sites as
Right.
well. So
Right.
to liven up the neighborhoods and bring them back to a safe place to be.
Great. And the last question that I have has along those similar lines. The gang-involved kids are the ones that I'm most particularly concerned about. Of course, I'm concerned about all of our young people, but these are the people that I think need the hardest focus at this moment in time. The apprenticeships in the city in particular. Do we have a mechanism by which we can afford a young person a job, an apprenticeship, although they are on probation? Because going into the neighborhoods, as I do, listening to the parents, this is what I hear from the parents. My child needs a job, but they are on probation, or they've been to Los Prietos, or they are in Puente, and no employer wants to give them a chance. So is the city stepping up in this regard?
Councilmember Falcone, that has actually always been the intent of the City Youth Apprentice Program. We do the outreach into those neighborhoods of the greatest need, and those are the youth that are identified. But to take it a step further, the community youth strategy is very specifically identifying a number of youth that are either involved with probation, challenges in school, and all of that. And I think they've identified, at least to date, 50 or more youth. That we have assured them that as soon as they feel those youth are ready to be placed in a work environment where they could be successful, that they are a high priority for all of the youth job opportunities that we have, whether it's the city or Trade Art or SARE through the Workforce Investment Board.
Yes,
So
that's another avenue that can be utilized.
yes, so that the short-term strategy group of all the different youth-serving agencies are concerned that they really address all of the supports for those youth before they place them in an employment setting, because they want them to be successful, and we understand that. So
Right.
we are doing our own community outreach and taking referrals from people in the community, neighborhoods, parents, schools, and then at the same time, we're working very closely with that group that has identified, gets overused, but a target audience, if you will. So I assure you that that is exactly where we are.
Great, and to branch out from that, the multi-jurisdictional recreational task force that you and I are involved in particular, I think that we can bring this model to the rest of the region and act as a stepping stone for the other regions to maybe not, well, to help out their own young people, but also just to spread this model throughout the entire South Coast. So I'm looking to
Great idea.
get your assistance on that, so thank you.
Ms. Snyder?
Thank you. Well, first off, just to commend you and the department of the $234,000 plus that you had to adjust in your department budget, that not one dime went against lowering any youth programs. So that was probably hard to do, but really necessary, and I want to commend you for keeping that priority a top one. One question on the SARE Jobs for Progress. It's a 3-year program. Is there a goal of number of kids served with on jobs? You have 11 so far and 69 clients, but at the end of the, is the $800,000+ supposed to be used to target a certain number of kids, or how does that work?
I believe the numbers that they're looking at are between 150 to 200 youth.
Okay, and you have 3 years to do
Yes,
that?
over the 3 years.
Okay. Good. Okay. Well, we'll have to keep track of that then, because it's been 9 months or so. Is that right? It's been 9 months?
No, it hasn't been that long.
Not
Since
that long?
November.
November.
Yeah.
Okay, so 6 months.
Yes.
Okay. And and I also want to thank you for what you mentioned about being the coordinator of the different agencies who are and businesses who are saying we're interested in having interns, because I know that was brought up at the last strategy meeting, and rightly so, everyone was focusing on the short-term issues, schools coming out, who are these kids, how are we going to get involved with the families, with some, kind of social services issues, and the jobs were sort of put down towards the bottom for good reason for some of the youth. But at the same time, I think it's important that, especially if businesses are hearing about this and come out and say, we want to participate, we got to take that now, because if it just sort of goes by the wayside, then when we're ready, per se, for a bigger program, they might not be there, or might not be available or interested anymore. So I appreciate that you're rearranging the department to do that, because I think that will bring back great dividends in the long run. But those were Ms. Falcone answered or asked some of the questions I also had as well. So I'll just stop there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now I've got a couple. First of all, on the van, I would recommend that you work out a place to keep it. That may seem obvious, but I'm aware of another van in town that got purchased and sort of wound up on the back of a parking lot somewhere. And we don't want to have that happen, because they go downhill very quickly, so it needs to be probably undercover, and that may be hard to do, but if we work with facilities when you're not using it, so it just isn't sitting out there. So I would recommend you do that. On the job shadowing question, my sort of dream with this thing would be that this integrates at the high school with the career counseling division that they have. And I think a lot of the kids that we're dealing with don't have a lot of hope and don't really have much of a vision about where they're going to be winding up in the future. So the reason why the job shadowing is so important is it gives kids a chance to see something that probably they never would have thought of in their normal home life situation, and probably the parents wouldn't necessarily have thought of it either. So if we can follow that up with the high school, I'm just looking at Santa Barbara High School, so that they know they need to take a certain amount of classes, for example, for a position depending on one of our departments here, and that they sort of work for their 4 years toward being able to have a job. I think that's a follow-up thing that we could work on with the school and maybe have some success. So anyway, let's move on to the next section here, which I think is Police Activities League. Chief Klaus or Captain Zeiler?
Good afternoon. How's everybody doing?
See, Captain Zeiler, you can't retire because you are the face of PAL.
Well, I think I might still be keeping in touch with it in one form or another. We'll see how that goes. Did I just forward by hitting space? That one, okay. What I want to start off talking about the Police Activities League, but the first thing is, as it relates to the things I'm going to talk about today, it's things that we do with the police department that it's PAL, it's programs, it's DARE, it's the PAL officers, those type of things. I won't specifically talk about enforcement, things that we do. A lot of it you already know about, and if you do have some specific questions about enforcement as it relates to youth and the gang issues you're talking about, Deputy Chief Goss is here. He can answer any of those questions if you have those. The PAL program, what I'm showing on the board is what we are proposing that is going to occur in this school year that we're coming up into right now. This summer, our Campership Alliance, we're looking at about 528 children that we believe are going to be involved in the after school or the summertime Campership Alliance. And we get these families that we're looking at. We specifically target the lower socioeconomic poverty level. We've got 2 of our Title I schools that are 100% at that level. We use the YSSs within the elementary schools and the junior highs to identify those families for us, and then we send out mailers to these families to invite them to come be part of our campership. We started our first campership sign-up 2 weeks ago Saturday, and we had 186 families show up in about a 5-hour period of time. We had them all the way across the 3rd level of the annex, down the stairs, and it was quite a few children showed up and their families. And then the following Friday, in the 3-hour segment, we did about 100 more. So we still probably have, when I left the office this morning, there were still 5 or 6 people in the office, so we'll probably end up, you know, including 350, 400 families, because there are multiple children in some of the families. So that's going to be going. It's enhanced some this year. We have, we'll get into the campership slide here a little bit more after that. The enrichment programs has something that's been on the rise over the years. We partnered up with Parks and Rec to start the AOK program last year. We got involved in a digital editing program that we use as an enrichment program, and we help with the kids' homework in the lab that we have on Anapamu Street. And then we also have a partnership with UCSB's PAL Tech, where they've got online actual grad students that are doing their pre-professional training, that are working with the kids in 4th grade that are identified by Adams and Franklin School that have specific learning disabilities and things that we help them with, and they come into the school once a week after school. The other thing we did this year is we did have an art program we were doing with Arts Alive. This year we changed over and went with the Santa Barbara Museum of Art. It's been a great thing. We do 10-week segments. All of our kids that are involved in the AOK go to that after school. They go 1 day a week. The thing that's good about the museum is every 10 weeks they have, at the McCormick House, they present their art. They have a little lunch. They have a little food. They invite the parents. They actually put their art up in the museum. It's a big thing for the kids, and it really showcases them a lot more, and they're really much more into it than they used to be. It's leading into where we're doing is now we have kids that are in that 5th and 6th grade level, and now they want to know, is this going to happen next year? And they're going to the junior high. And that'll kind of lead into this partnership we've had with Parks and Rec about doing after-school programs in the junior high that we just got involved in. We're going to be getting involved in this coming year. The sports programs. The sport programs are growing leaps and bounds. We were in the process of going out in the neighbor community and finding out what it is that we wanted to do. A lot of it started Our Lady of Guadalupe. On a Sunday evening, the parents said they'd like to have their kids involved in soccer because they can't afford to pay for the Santa Barbara soccer leagues. We started a soccer league. We ended up now that we have 4 soccer teams that are playing from elementary school through junior high, and they're doing an absolute great job. They actually went to a state PAL tournament, the junior high age kids, and took second in the state. And they were at our event we had a couple weeks ago, but they've been doing a really good job. And the soccer program is growing leaps and bounds. Our basketball program is up to 6 teams now. Part of what we're doing with Parks and Rec, like Sarah had mentioned, we met with Dr. Sarvis last week. We have a meeting with the principals the week after school. And in working with the recreation coordinators, we have a list of programs that we want to start after school in the fall, like martial arts and hip hop. But we also don't want to just go in and mandate to the schools what programs we're going to have for them. Like, for instance, Toledo Valley wants to do a wrestling club. Well, maybe instead of a wrestling, doing a hip hop there or martial arts, they'll do a wrestling club. So they're going to have a lot of input. We already know that some of the kids going up in the middle schools, we want to continue the art program, so we're working with Parks and Rec on that. So I think it's going to work out well. Brian Sarvis is behind it 100%, and we're going to be on all those 4 campuses. So a lot of those sport programs are things that with Parks and Rec will work together and enhance some of those after-school sport, get them in some more leagues. One thing interesting about Santa Barbara is all 4 of our middle schools, not one of them have a gym. Up in the valley where I live, all 4 junior high schools, they all have a gym. So it doesn't seem like a big deal to you, but when you go out and play basketball in a blacktop and a hard rim, it's a whole lot different atmosphere. So we're going to try to work out some partnerships with Page, East Side Boys Club, West Side Boys Club, so we can get them in the gyms and they get a lot more excited about doing that type of thing. All the programs that we have are pretty much represented on here. The Campership Alliance, hip hop dance. We're doing a contract through Everybody Dance now to do the hip hop dance. Club basketball, I mentioned a minute ago. Martial arts is done by Michael McDonald. He's done a really good job. If you came to our event, there was a group of kids that came there and did a demonstration. That program is growing. Digital editing, soccer. We started our first Pony League baseball team this year. One of our sponsors was the coach of another team, and we brought our team in the very first game, and a lot of them didn't have a lot of the equipment that they needed. So he basically told Kent Wachowski at the practice, take the kids out to SportsMart, buy them all the stuff they need. We bought them cleats, bats, gloves, everything, and just wrote the check and paid for the whole kids to suit them all up. So his name's Michael Hill. So he's a great guy. So he's been a sponsor of ours for a couple of years now. The Santa Barbara Museum of Art, I can't say enough about what kind of a program and the quality of program that they put in. Not only do they do arts, but they take them in the museum and they get to see all the displays that are coming in. There was a pretty good display that came in on Chinese art and dress. They actually painted T-shirts and had it on display at the event. And the kids were pretty amazing. These are 5th and 6th grade kids, some of the art that they do. It's pretty impressive. The Youth Leadership Council is our older junior high through high school level. We're taking 4 of our best youth leadership to a national conference in Ohio in July for 4 days, so they're all looking forward to that. Trips and excursions, we have tons of those, and then the big one this coming school year for us is going to be that ongoing Parks and Rec collaboration, working with the junior highs to get those programs on the campuses during the school year. Campership Alliance, again, I mentioned it's basically that we're the lead agency of 14 different groups throughout the South Coast that provide 39 local camps from Refugio all the way to Carpinteria. We have a Sequoia camp that's an 8-day long environmental camp that we load the van up and take kids up. We have a Life After High School, which is hosted by one of the UC campuses every year. We take the youth leadership up there, and they stay in the dorms and they eat the food, and they listen to the professors, and they learn how to get ready for college and what they need to do and that type of thing. That's always a big thing during the summer. And then we have three weekends that are with cops and kids, we call it. We take them up to the state beaches up here and load up the van. We usually get 30 to 40 kids and do rope courses and horseback riding and all that, so that works out well. This slide I just want to represent on behalf of the police department what PAL does. The DARE officer and the PAL officer. The DARE officer teaches all the elementary schools here on a DARE program. The DARE program has changed over the years. There's a lot of the things involved about peer pressure and character counting and values and things like that. There are, the anti-smoking and, alcohol education, that type of things, but they really try to build, into that accountability and values and those type of things. So the program has significantly changed. But the best thing more than anything is it really builds that relationship with the kids of that younger age and the police, and that, we're a good part of the community. We're not, what they hear on the streets is the police are bad, and, we want to try to break that as early as we can in their lives. The PAL officer right now, it's Kent Wojciechowski. He's actually the founder of PAL back in 1999. He's great with the kids. And then the PAL employees we have right now, I have 3 full-time employees and 9 part-time employees. And our budget this year to pay their salaries is $283,000. That's not including benefits and workers' comp and all that goes with it, and the salaries above for the officers as well. That does not include benefits. So there's a significant amount of money that's put forward by both the city and the police department on behalf of the police department to continue these services for the kids, and it's continuing to grow. Our event we had a couple weeks ago, we raised about $180,000. We had about 310 people there. As some of the nonprofit, fundraisers I've been to this year, there's a significant drop in, attendance and monies that are put forward. But we've got a pretty good core group, and we're happy with the amount of money we raised, and we're just going to keep stepping it up. Our funding for the after-school programs for next year is $52,000, and thanks to the CDBG from the city for the first time, which I'm happy that we were awarded. We were fully funded within 2.5 months of being awarded that, the school being allowed to go on the campus to provide the program. And also the city of Goleta CDBG put in $9,000 as well. So that was for Goleta Valley. So I'm pretty happy with it. So any questions that you might have?
Questions? Ms. Falcone.
Well, thank you, Captain. I mean, between you and Wojo, and I'm very glad Wojo's back at this program, and of course through the chief's leadership and so forth. Really, I'm so proud of this program. It only took 3 or so years of constantly asking for CDBG, or at least suggesting to them. Right. I would never tell them what to do, but suggesting to them that this is an important program. The things that you do are really so integral to stopping the next generation, to breaking the cycle of gang violence and kids without hope and kids without futures and young people who think that all cops are bad. In fact, that cops with kids up at the beaches looks like fun. I'd like to go. So
you're more than welcome to come.
Well, I'd jump on a horse for the first time in a number of years. I'd love to do that. I have a couple of questions for you. And well, first of all, I also want to thank major donors like Mr. Hill, Michael Hill, and also to mention Ginny and Chad Dreyer, who have gotten behind this program with all 4 fists, and they are considerable fists, and they really have stepped up in major ways, and we thank them from the bottom of our hearts. The Campership Alliance, you mentioned the multiple kids and families, and that's another thing when I go into the neighborhoods and I talk to the parents, say, well, it's all well and good that the fees are lessened in our parks and recreation programs, but I've got 3 kids, I've got 4 kids. How do I do that? So is this all, are the fees for this all waived for the Campership Alliance, or is there a sliding scale? How do you work that?
Well, there's
especially with a family with multiple kids.
yeah. The agreement with the alliance was that they wanted some minimal amount of fees. It's $15 for a child to go to camp. They feel and we feel that $15 is more than likely to ensure that that child's going to show up if they have a minimum amount that they give, but probably 3/4 of the multiple children families only pay a $115 fee. We don't. It's not a revenue. It's not dispersed to the alliance. It basically just covers the administrative time for us to do the sign-up time, to do it on a Saturday, and to pay overtime or adjust schedules. And it's a minimal amount of money, but there are a lot of people that don't have any money. There is proof of income that goes with that, and for those that can't pay, there are some that we don't charge them anything that have come back every year with their children.
So they can pay $15 for one of their children, and then probably the other two children's siblings can come along.
Yeah, I looked at all the checks and I didn't see one check for over $15, and I don't know that there's many. 2 and 3 children per family is not an ought, and I think most of them are just paying $15.
Good.
Some are more than
That's-
happy to pay the $30 if
that's
they're
great.
able to do that, but if they don't need it, then we've got money set aside to take care of the difference.
Great. That's terrific. I'm really glad to hear that. The digital editing, the digital video, there's a program in town called the Youth Sin Media, which is run out of the Zona Seca Foundation. And they concentrate, in fact, I'm on the board, they concentrate on particularly gang-involved young people, but they're teaching them how to do cinematography and editing and video and so forth. And I'm wondering, between what you're doing with UCSB and maybe you could look into the Sin Youth Media program with Osiris Castañeda out there through the Zona Seca program, and see what they're doing. Maybe there's a synergy that can happen, or some of the young people who are involved in Sin Youth Media might benefit from learning how to get into the UCSB or the CC, because City College also has some programs out there. So if it all coordinates in a way, maybe there's a greater synergy to be had there. And could you elaborate just a moment on you mentioned that you have young people going into schools, identifying and working with the developmentally disabled or the children who've been identified with learning disabilities, whether it's dyslexia or some other kind of learning disability. This is a former career of mine, so I'm special ed, so I'm sort of interested just a little bit more in what you're doing there.
Well, we've left it up to the school, the teachers in both Adams and Franklin in the 4th grade to identify children that are having problems on a science and math basis that are doing their homework and they don't have the time or they don't have the support at home. They get identified to us, and then we have the youth, the pre-professional trainers from UCSB come in the lab and then do actual online through the internet, like chalkboard type working exercises with them on the internet.
So it's more like tutoring?
It's more like tutoring
I
for
see.
them. Yeah,
Okay.
and we're going to continue that. In fact, next year, school year, we're looking at enhancing that a little bit, because what we're finding is that even if it's 2 children per tutor, if they're not there, the value of face-to-face is we didn't really know how measurable it was, but we noticed that when there's a tutor standing between 2 children and working with them, they stay more engaged, they stay more focused, and there's more interaction. The internet, it's real hard to do that. Even though we have real good Illuminate software to make it go real time, the kids often, we catch them drifting, and I mean, they're kids, they're fourth grade kids, so we're going to work on that a little bit better, but yeah, that we pretty much leave that up to the school. We tell them what our capabilities are and who the tutors are, and then they pattern those children that come into
That
us.
also goes to a slightly different, and this is the last thing I have, a different function, and that is if you talk to Matt Sanchez in All for One and the young people that he's worked with and turned out of gangs, and now what I hear so many of them say is, it took just one person to look me in the eye and to stand next to me and know that, and tell me that they care about me. And that's really all it took. So that personal interaction, that one-on-one or that one-on-two really can make all the difference. And that is what I've heard has turned so many of these young people that Matt has worked with. I knew somebody cared about me.
No, I agree.
Thank you.
Mr. Schneider?
Thank you. And just also to commend your amazing work. It's incredible to see the numbers grow year after year. And you mentioned PAL started in 1999, so we're getting up to the 10th anniversary, which is
next year.
very exciting. Has there been any work or thought of looking to the alumni of PAL and seeing where they are today and how PAL maybe has influenced their lives in the last 10, over this 10-year period, and how that might help us fundraise or other, talk to their younger siblings in terms of getting involved or anything like that?
On a formal basis, no, but as far as evaluation and tracking of the kids we have in our current programs, we have started that with the schools to try to figure out how they're going and to keep in contact with them. We right now have kids that have been involved in PAL, the PAL programs that have gotten into obviously into the high school and the college level. There's one I found out about yesterday that started in the PAL program. He got involved in the Navy, the Sea Cadet program several years ago, and he just got an appointment at Annapolis.
Wow.
So he may not have been in the same type of an area where he didn't have those things, but he's stayed in school. I mean, he's been on focus, and that's a pretty good accomplishment to get that point. But you're right, we do need to start trying to look at, because of the amount of kids we're getting involved, some type of a post-PAL tracking, how well are they doing. We did give one of our seniors a $4,000 scholarship to college. She got accepted to Northern Arizona. So we're going to give her $1,000 a semester for the first 2 years, and one of the person in the audience matched it for her last 2 years, so she got an $8,000 scholarship.
Well, that's a great example. I mean, powerful stories,
Right.
and from what I know of working with various nonprofits and just dealing with the philanthropic and foundation community, they really want to see that kind of results, outcome-based data in order to keep on funding or sustain it. I know we're going to get into that in the next segment, but having that information not only will just, reemphasize what we already know, that this program works, but then can help matching funds or other outside funding that we may not have seen otherwise, and help us just keep track of what happened to these folks and to these kids when they grow into adults, because they're powerful stories. So thank you very much.
Okay, I think we have one other section in this area on youth strategy planning, and then I must remind the committee that we have one whole other department to review this afternoon. So, Mr. Armstrong.
Okay, and my job is just to kind of wrap it up and talk a little about what our youth strategy planning committee's been doing, and I think all of you have attended one or more of the meetings, so you're pretty familiar with it. But as you know, we started right after the first of the year. First, we had a group of about, I think it was probably 30 or 40 folks that were involved in all of the different facets of dealing with youth violence, and brainstormed for a couple of meetings. And we came to the conclusion we needed a smaller group to start working on. And basically, we had three things that we wanted to achieve. First was to just get an inventory of the various services that are available for at-risk kids, and then talk about a short-term strategy and a long-term strategy. But first I want to just talk a little about the demographics of, I guess I'm supposed to do this. Normally somebody else does that for me, so I can handle it. I'm a big boy. Yeah. First, I want to talk just kind of what the scope of the issue is. If you look on the South Coast, there's nearly 27,000 kids between the age of, I think this is up to high school, from 5 into high school. It's an amazing number when you think about it. If you look in our own city, we've got almost 17,000 kids. The police department has identified 11 gangs in our community, 11 separate gangs. And we think there's about 750, and that's plus or minus probably about 20%, of members or associates in gangs. And of that group, there's probably about 100 that we would call hardcore. And again, that's probably plus or minus 20%. And what we decided early on is we did not want to deal with just that larger group of the 17,000, but we really wanted to deal with the 750 that are the affiliated kids in the core group, because we believe that that's the area we need to focus on, because actually from a kind of a success standpoint, most of our kids have positive behaviors and they're very engaged. The other thing that in looking at this, we very quickly came to the conclusion that this is not about not having enough programs for youth. This is our community is blessed with a lot of private organizations and lots of programs that are available to youth. But we do believe that when you really look at that core group, right in the middle there's not a lot of organizations that are dealing just specifically with that segment. And that's where we wanted to focus. It's complicated. If you look at the groups that are dealing in this area, you have law enforcement. And when you think about law enforcement, it's not just the Santa Barbara Police Department. It's the county sheriff. It's probation. It's the court system. In some cases, it's the state. You got education. We've got county schools. We've got city schools. We've got continuation schools. We've got private schools providing educational opportunities. In terms of support services, there's a myriad of both governmental agencies and also not-for-profit organizations deal in that area. In recreation, it's not just the city recreation program, it's private recreation providers, and now we have PAL, who's another player in the recreation area, so there's a lot of players there. And we've talked a lot about employment today. So there's a lot of folks, and what's challenging about this, and you've all been in my office and seen that, big group of organizations. There are probably 200 or 300 organizations dealing in parts of this area, and each one has their little silo. They have their own funding base. They have their own objectives, and although they communicate with each other, they rarely really coordinate very well in trying to provide services to that core group right there in the center. And so that was kind of our challenge, is how do we get those folks to work together better and really focus on that core group. So as you know, for the last, I guess I have to press every one of these. Whoops. For the last about 3-4 months, we've had a core group of representatives from county probation, the county office of education, the school district, law enforcement, not just our own law enforcement, but also probation, non-governmental agencies, and that's organizations like Fighting Back, Zona Seca, the other nonprofits in our office. We've also had the foundations involved, both the Santa Barbara Foundation, the new group that Fernand Surratt's formed, participating in a real major planning process to how can we work better together. And also I mentioned the major gang outreach providers, folks like Councilmember Falcone mentioned Matt Sanchez from All for One. We've also had Los Compadres make presentations to our group. If nothing else, it's an amazing group of folks working together. I think it's almost unprecedented to have that group working, and really everybody's attending the meetings. They're very actively engaged. And we've developed pretty much the 3 strategies I started to talk about. First, develop a comprehensive inventory of services and resources. Again, not just a laundry list of every organization in town, but the one specifically dealing with at-risk kids and kids that are involved in gangs. And it's surprising how much work it takes to do that. And I think we're pretty much done with that. Now we'll be translating that inventory into Spanish. We work very closely with 211 Family Services Agency, who runs the 211 system, and so that'll be available to folks, we think, very quickly. The second thing is to develop it. We really decided, let's focus on this summer. And so Fred Razzo's headed a committee of folks. Chief Sanchez is involved in that. County Schools is involved. Looking at, and probation's involved, let's identify as many of those kids in that core, that 50, 100, 150 kids that we can work with this summer to try and help. And we've had an amazing collaboration with the school district and the continuation schools to identify those kids and deal with bureaucratic issues like getting access to their school records, and getting access to their criminal records and having everybody look at those. And now we're in the process of meeting with those kids and their families and talking about what are you going to do this summer and what can we do to help you this summer. And I think in the next 2-3 weeks, it's all going to come together, but I'm real pleased with how that's worked so far. The second part of that is to develop a long-term strategy. We're holding off on really getting the long-term strategy going because we want to focus on the summer program and also use that as the beta test site for the long-term strategy. A key part of what we think is going to be really the linchpin on this is to have a group of, and I don't know what the right term would be, of mentors, gang outreach workers that work with these kids, similar to what Fighting Back has with the youth service workers, who work with these kids, get their trust, and then basically create a plan for each kid that's based upon their needs, whether they're academic needs, whether they need a job, whether they have athletic issues, whether they need help in school, all of those kind of things, so we can work with them individually. That's where I think probably in the next few months, probably after the summer, we may be coming back to you with some kind of budget implications. One of the challenges on this is this is not just a city issue. It's a South Coast issue. And how do we break down the various barriers that we have of cooperation and working together so it doesn't just become a City of Santa Barbara issue? The other thing on top of all of that is what's going on at the state. And it's kind of a moving target with the state, but the state funds a lot of these organizations we're working with, either directly or indirectly. And although we may be able to put something into that equation, until we know what the state's going to do, it's hard for those organizations, even like Family Services Agency, to say, oh, we can work with you when they're being threatened with pretty significant funding cuts, much more than we could ever, even help them out with. So that's something to keep in the back of your mind is, we want to come up with a long-term strategy, but we want to have something that works. And also we're dealing with the state budget issues that almost every one of these organizations is facing some kind of state budget cut that could affect them. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay, Ms. Schneider, you have a question?
Well, just also, I've said it before, but to thank and commend your leadership, Jim, and I know Don Olson and Marcelo Lopez and Jennifer in our office too, in convening this and acting as facilitator, and Nancy and so many city staff has been part of this, and just like I think we've all said before back in November, how important it was, I think, for the city to take a leadership role in this and not necessarily do all the work because there's so many experts and other organizations out there that specialize in particular activities. But they didn't. It's just amazing going to these meetings and some of them never met the other people, and yet they're dealing with the same population. And to bridge those gaps have been tremendously important, and I think will help in some ways with some of the budget cuts we're all experiencing, because they'll be able to use what resources they do have better, and they're all also seeing how they can use their current resources differently. For example, Ben Romo brings up in the county education office, they had a position opening. They totally rearranged the job description in order to help facilitate the short-term strategy, and it fits in with their mission as well. So I look forward to seeing the summer happen, and same with PAL, to look at, as the question I had with PAL is to try to figure out a way, even though it's hard because we're trying to put something together really quick for a short period of time, but to monitor the kids that are we're focusing on this summer, the 100 or so I think was the number that was coming up, and track their progress throughout the summer, because that I know, again, when Hutton Foundation, Santa Barbara Foundation, they've been sitting around the table, they're going to need to go back to their board of trustees and the foundation roundtable and so forth and say, well, if we give X amount to keep this sustainable, what's the return on that investment? And so if there's some way to try to, not just in numbers, because the numbers are good, but also the stories involved, because that really gets to people's, hearts and minds. So, but again, it's just been a tremendous process, and also want to commend Bill Batty and their work in putting the resource inventory together. And again, it's just amazing that we've never had that before in areas rich as we are. As resource rich as we are. So thank you for that.
I might just mention, between Fred Razzo, who's going to look at the numbers, and I think Chief Sanchez, who loves the stories, we're going to have a combination of both good, solid results and also some really good stories out of this summer.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jim. We talked about a year ago about what I referred to as the particles in the universe. And there are all those many, 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 many organizations that work with various different populations, including the city. And last year, council, I'm not going to say threw money, but, gave more money toward various different programs. But what I kept hearing was missing was this coordination. And although in the long term we've learned from the past, in the 90s we had the Pro-Youth Coalition, and for a number of reasons that worked on many levels and then didn't work in the long-term sustainable world, which is something that we need to learn from and figure out this time. But the foundations were waiting, really, for that coordination before they stepped up and put any money, whether it's short-term grants or long-term sustainable money, toward an effort. And we still don't know what that long-term effort is going to look like. But it took, and I'm so glad that we've done this. This, as I said before, is probably one of the proudest things that I think that we've done, is we have brought the particles of the universe together, at least in one room. And you know from standing in that room where all of the people were, that there was a tremendous amount of, oh, you do this, oh, you do that, oh gosh, who knew, which is cuckoo because it's a small community, but that was the reality. So now the city has acted as the convener for all of these people to get together, and you've whittled it down to some essential components, and they are the core group that is working together now. Now, I don't quite know how we clone Matt Sanchez, but that person that goes out into the community and works on the ground with the gangs, that is the person that has been there doing a lot of this work. But what was missing was they didn't have a place. Once they've turned the kid, the young person, I don't mean kid derogatorily, it's just, my terminology. But once they've turned the young person out of the gang lifestyle, there was a lack of knowledge as to where to put that young person, where to direct that young person, what did they need. And so that's part of what this effort is going toward. And I look forward to the future. I think it's some of the most important work we've ever done, because PAL and our Parks and Recreation and all of these many hundreds of different organizations can do all the good work that they do, but without that coordination together, it's kind of like, whistling into the universe in a way. So go forth. I don't think that this should be a city institutionalized long-term program. And I don't know where this long-term strategy lives, quite frankly, but that'll develop. It'll materialize. And I think that we're doing, all together as a community, we're doing yeoman's work. And I think that we need to take this out into the greater community through the multi-jurisdictional recreation task force. I'm glad we revived that and kept it going. So thanks, Jim.
Okay, well, thanks, everybody. This has been a great series of presentations. Now I'm going to call for about a 1-minute break, and we're going to bring up the Public Works Department Street Circulation and Transportation Funding. All right, so we'll resume the meeting, our second series of departments today. Mr. Casey, are you going to lead off on this?
Yes, Mr. Chair. Good
Please
afternoon.
proceed.
Mr. Chair, committee members, I'm Paul Casey, Acting Public Works Director, and we wanted to take a few moments to talk to you about transportation funding. And in particular, I think you requested to go into a little more detail about what our stable transportation funding sources provide to the community, and then understand that if those funding sources go away, what will be the implications of that. And so we got a fairly straightforward PowerPoint presentation to talk about. I will give a brief introduction of some slides you've seen before, but then the focus will be on John Wozniak talking about our Streets Capital program, and then Browning Allen will talk about alternative transportation modes as well. You've seen this slide before. This is the basic summary of our steady ongoing transportation funding sources. And here you can see we have about a $14.5 million of funding that comes from a variety of sources, including the city's utility users tax. We are one of the few communities in the county, and if not the region, that has a utility users tax. And the benefit of that is funding general fund programs, but also additional funding for our streets programs, which has really allowed us over the years to have a fairly robust and good capital program in the streets regard to maintain our streets from a pavement standpoint and others. And then we have Measure D funding, which is the half-cent sales tax that was approved by the voters in 1989 that is set to expire in 2010. And its renewal measure to extend that half-cent sales tax is going to be on the November ballot, and it's going to be called Measure A. Council has been talking about some risks to the utility users tax, especially on the communications side, in which there's some pending lawsuits from the communication entities challenging cities' ability to collect the utility users tax on communications. So a number, I think over 30 cities have already adopted a revised utility ordinance that kind of addresses that technicality issue, and Council is considering that as well. It's about $2 million to the streets fund if that does not pass, and if we're legally challenged and lose that funding. And then if Measure A does not pass, we would lose a little over $5 million of ongoing funding for transportation funded programs. Combined, that's almost half of our ongoing transportation funding that's at risk if we don't continue just with the funding that we have going now. And so that's a substantial chunk, and what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about what the implications of that might be. Here's just another very brief example. I'm not going to spend much time, but it just shows the variety of programs that we're able to fund with our funding sources. And they go from operational improvements, looking at road and sidewalk repair, pothole repair, and that such. You have your transit component, which Mr. Allen will talk about in more detail, and you have your capital projects, and that is primarily, you know, your slurry sealing and street repair and traffic signals and some other just basic infrastructure that we often take for granted. And then finally, for an introduction slide, this just shows that we do get some one-time money, which really helps supplement our budget. But you can't expect that on an ongoing basis. And you can see we have a pretty large chunk coming right now because the voters approved statewide Proposition 1B, which is a big transportation bond measure, which gave us a chunk of about $1.4 million. And we're going to get one more chunk of $1.4 million, which really helps to supplement our program and get even more street capital projects done and other entities as well. But it's not good ongoing funding sources. It's kind of one-time capital, which is great. It's really needed and appreciated, but it's not that ongoing funding that you really need to stay on top of it. And so now I want to turn it over to Mr. Wozniak and show how important it is to have that steady source of funding and stay on top of your maintenance program.
Thank you, Mr. Casey. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, committee members. John Wozniak, Principal Civil Engineer for the Public Works Department. And I'd like to share some slides that we've previously shown Council, but to reiterate the concerns regarding infrastructure maintenance. And with that, at our October 9th, 2007 meeting, I did a presentation on pavement maintenance system update. And I'd like to, again, refresh your memories on some issues associated with specifically pavement maintenance. And as the slide shows, you can see that timely pavement maintenance can be cost effective. And so with the natural progression or deterioration of the asphalt pavement's life, you can see where timely restoration or treatment can lessen the long-term costs. So one of those stitch in time saves nine type scenarios, where if you do apply proactive treatments early on, saves money in reactive treatments later. So cost-effective solutions is timely pavement maintenance. And briefly, with pavement life cycles, you can see our strategy, which is to use slurry seal as a proactive pavement maintenance strategy. When you have a new pavement surface, over time it deteriorates, and we rejuvenate that pavement surface by adding the slurry seal to add a sealing coat to it. It's not a structural component. It's more maintenance for keeping the water and the sun from deteriorating our pavement structure. So it rejuvenates the pavement back to levels where it can be cost effectively maintained. And this shows really you pay now or you pay more later, because if you had to chase pavement that has been deteriorated, it's more costly. This graph shows how we've done over time and how we've utilized Measure D funds and other funding sources for pavement maintenance. In the late 1980s, our city's pavement condition index, or PCI, was at 59, and that's out of 100, 100 being brand new pavement, and 0 being virtually broken down so that it's a dirt road. So with starting at a 59, and back in the early or mid 1980s, we've gone and spent approximately $3.2 million a year up until 1996, where we've done exceptional in raising the pavement condition index and throughout the city, and this is a city average, from that 559 level to a peak of 76 in 1996. And to give you an idea of how much that money equates to in today's dollars, $3.2 million in today's dollars is about an equivalent of $8.5 million. So you can see that our last several years of budgeting has been around that $2.2 million mark. And so you can see that we've spent a significant amount of monies in the past to bring our pavement condition levels up to the current levels. And then we have marked on the slide a goal, a city goal of 70, being where it's desirable to be above that line, to be as cost effective as we can be. Certainly higher number is better, but that has been the goal for our budgeting strategies and pavement maintenance strategies. And we estimate that it would take approximately now $4 million a year to maintain our roads to this current PCI level of 70. And that the reason for that is that our increased paving materials costs, as I've mentioned many times at council before, is that the pavement materials costs have risen significantly. The oil prices continue to go up. I think they're up to $124, $25 a barrel now, and no end in sight of cost increases. This is a slide that was shown at council, but is also shown at I believe it was the August 1st South County Measure A renewal meeting, and it shows what could possibly happen if funding levels are not upkept. And so with the current funding level, and then we're talking about that $2.2 million average that we've had over the last several years, you could see that what we've gained in the dark blue on the left could be lost in not that long of a period if we didn't continue to apply strategies and funds, resources to our pavement maintenance program. And we've also extrapolated from what that would be like without the Measure D, and it would decline significantly faster if we didn't have funding sources such as Measure D to augment our program. And if you, that concludes my portion of the presentation. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
It so happens I have a couple questions for you. In reading some of the city magazines, I've noted there are some different materials and used in some places. I'd be interested in knowing if there's any cost payback in using a different sort of material. And secondly, we in council had a discussion on the concrete streets in the city, which my neighborhood has some. And I do get complaints about that, and you didn't say anything about that, so those are my two questions.
Mr. Chair, in response to the alternative materials, we are proactively seeking the newer technologies of paving materials, and we're working closely with the County of Santa Barbara and other agencies, as the county has launched a very aggressive campaign on alternative materials. So we're evaluating those, we're meeting with them, and we are planning to use in the next design of the pavement maintenance. Right now we're going out to construction soon on our pavement maintenance zone 2. That'll be coming to council soon. But our next design, we have proposed approximately $3.5 million in the fiscal year 09 budget, which is an increase from the monies that we've been allocated in the recent years. So yes, we are proactively seeking alternate pavement materials. There are cost-effective cape seals or sealant materials that we are planning to incorporate into our pavement maintenance strategies, and so we plan to use those in the next design. So
that would be probably a different bidding process and different vendors, perhaps.
Mr. Chair, we'd expect very similar bidders for that type of work. The pavement maintenance type work is being generally done by the same type of contractors. And certainly there are some specialties that would likely be subcontracted to the main components. Whoever is the largest piece of the pie of the pavement maintenance strategy would likely be the general contractor bidding with some subcontractors for their specialties. And we have broken up our slurry seal contract from our pavement our pavement prep contracts, because we didn't want to have overhead attached to get us our biggest cost-effective gain for those types of projects. And so if we need to bid them separately, we certainly will evaluate that.
And then concrete.
Concrete. Thank you, Mr. Chair. There are approximately 4% of our roads are concrete streets. And concrete streets are a slightly different category of roads than pavement in the fact that they're a rigid structure and that they, although they be bumpy and their appearance may be rather concerning, their structure generally is very adequate and sound, so that they are not in the category that they would generally in the category that they don't need to be replaced. So while they may have a lower pavement condition index in our city, they do have the ability to withstand the structural or the use of it. So what we're seeing generally in our concrete streets is that their appearance isn't what we're accustomed to as compared to many of the asphalt roads. However, performance-wise and structural-wise, they have that structural integrity. And so in the past, the slurry seal program hasn't cost-effectively been able to be a cure for those abnormalities of concrete. And so we are in this next Zone 2 upcoming construction contract, as I mentioned previously at Council, on Carrillo Street for 3 blocks, on the school side, the high school side of the, junior high side of the Santa Barbara Street. We're going to be trying some new material methodologies with some combination of asphalt and slurry seal treatments to a concrete street to see if we can cost effectively convert that concrete street that isn't in our slurry seal inventory to a street that could possibly be maintained cost effectively with slurry seal. So we're attempting to do that. We'll probably need to evaluate that over a couple of years to see how effective that will be. If it is throwing good money after bad, it's just not a cost-effective strategy, but we want to try and do those sorts of things. Rubberized asphalt has historically been the long-term permanent solution, as you've seen what we've done on Chapala Street, and it's an excellent product. It's also performed well over time on Canon Perdido. That is a great solution. It's also quite an expensive solution. And so as grant funds become available or as funding for the program gets increased, then we would certainly like to entertain those types of more costly strategies, but more long-term solution strategies. I hope that answers.
Okay, great, perfect, thank you. So, Mr. Casey, on to Mr. Allen, or okay, was there a question on that, Mr. Funny?
No, just so I understand, although the concrete streets in our inventory may not look pretty, they're still structurally sound. Is that what you're saying to us?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember
Horton's neighbors can relax, the road's not falling apart, it just looks ugly?
Thank you. Generally, that's the case, and certainly there'll be an exception to the rule, but we would address those as part of our annual pavement maintenance programs. We not only slurry streets, we look at the highest need of all the roads in the city every time that we do a annual program.
Understood. Can we get a copy of that PowerPoint, please?
Certainly.
Add to the maintenance of the concrete streets, if they are in really, this was not working? Yeah. Oops. Okay. Yep. If the concrete street is really in bad shape, like we have uplifting because of roots and all that, the street crews will go out there and address it. Whether it be a temporary patch, if there's a pothole, they'll repair it. And from time to time, they will go out and do an overlay on a concrete street if it's in really bad shape. But that's not something they do on a routine basis, because it takes a lot of time and effort to do. And so we do address it.
Some of the areas that at least my neighbors complain about are broken up. It's not just a visual crack; it's actually pieces of chunks of concrete gone. So that's the problem. All right, let's move ahead.
Okay. I'm going to talk about transit alternative transportation. So what I've done, I have broken down our contract with MTD in a couple of areas. One, the specialized transit will be coming to council next month with the Measure A investment plan for council to either endorse or not endorse. And the reason I've broken it down between specialized transit and basic transit services, money with the new Measure A will be going directly to MTD for transit. So our specialized services are downtown waterfront shuttle and the crosstown shuttle. And you can see on the slide we currently are providing MTD by contract $1.15 million on beginning with July 1 of the upcoming fiscal year. That represents a 3.92% cost of living adjustment from the previous fiscal year. And then we have the commuter lot shuttle of $197,000 and change. And basically that service is the Creo commuter lot and the Coda Street commuter lot. And what we've done is broken the two shuttles apart. So we've added the money that was allocated to the Coda Street lot to the Crosstown shuttle. So they have all-day service where the Creo lot is only morning and afternoon service. So that was something that MTD requested several years ago, certainly about a year after the Crosstown shuttle came in, so they can have the Crosstown shuttle running all day long, and it's working out quite well. And then we have the basic transit service that we're calling the Crosstown shuttle, even though it's a shuttle using a 29 or 22-foot electric shuttle. It's a full fare service, $1.25 per one-way trip. We're providing a $367,000 subsidy to MTD for that service. We have the Mesa Loop, MTD. I think Councilmember Snyder was at the MTD board meeting last week. They're combining that with another service, so they'll have two-way service in both directions, linking the downtown with City College going up Korea Hill to Cliff Drive. Right now they have a CMAQ grant that's paying for the operational service. They're in the second year. They have one more year of support. Then our contract will kick in. We'll be providing the service for that portion of the operational support for that, which is $130,000. And then we have the new enhanced transit service that the council approved last year. We have the lines 1 and 2, $269,000. That's being funded out of the downtown parking program. And, that service is linking the east side and the west side with the downtown. And the reason we did that service is MTD actually had people, they were leaving standing at the curb because they had overloaded buses. So, and I have a slide that I'll show later on that has shown the changes in the ridership in that service. And then lines 6 and 11, we're providing $150,000 subsidy on that. And that's a partnership we have with the County of Santa Barbara as well as the City of Goleta. And UCSB recently added funding towards that service too. So we're linking our downtown up the State Street corridor, down Hollister. So something. Yeah, it's a start. We have one line that goes all the way to the airport and to UCSB, and the other one goes to the Camino Real Shopping Center. Again, ridership on that has increased as well. And then we have the Line 3, which is the shuttle service, transit service that goes from the downtown to the hospital, Cottage Hospital area, and then on out to the Cooper Shopping Center. And we increased the service all day long on that one. So on that one, it was a 30-minute service, headway. Now it's coming by every 20 minutes. On the other services that I mentioned, it used to be 30 minutes. It's now a 15-minute service. It's great, and we improved in the morning and afternoon peak hour. And 15 to 10. You remember.
I take it.
And then we also have our Easy Lift, our paratransit service. And so what we'll see when we come to council is we're going to be breaking that out, and I'll go into that detail in June when we talk about that. Talk about the increase in ridership, and these are the changes of ridership between from during the current fiscal year. So the line 1, they've seen a 7.4% increase. The East Side line 2, 8.4. Overall, they're seeing an 8% increase. And these were actual people who are actually getting on the buses. So this is and these were people who previously were not able to take transit to the downtown. Line 611, not as good as numbers as we've seen on the lines 1 and 2, but still good numbers. Increase in ridership is showing MTD that it was a good move to provide this service, and we're seeing the ridership to support that. And the telling one is line 3, Oak Park service, where they've seen a 20% increase in ridership. We've increased the ridership, the headway from 30 minutes to 20 minutes all day long. So it's going to the Cottage Hospital as well as the shopping center up on Upper State Street. So very good use of our funds. We also have a commitment to MTD for capital. One is for replacement of the shuttle buses, primarily on the downtown shuttle. They're having a little difficulty acquiring the buses, but we still have the commitment, as well as the downtown super stops. We're not paying the full cost for the shuttle replacement or the super stops, but it's the matching funds for the federal grants that they have to buy the buses or put the super stops in. And next one. My last slide is just talking about how we're paying for it. Currently in the operations we're spending, projecting for the next fiscal year a little over $2 million of Measure D funds, for the operational support, plus $284,000 in Measure D for capital. RDA is contributing money towards the downtown shuttle and the commuter lot shovel, $300,000. Parking program is contributing money, $392,000. And it's a combination of money for the lines 1 and 2, 6 and 11, and the downtown waterfront shuttle as well. And then we do have an offset of $125,000 of fare box, so for the downtown waterfront shuttle. So what happens on that one is MTD credits us on a monthly basis. When they give us our invoice, whatever actual fare box remember they receive, they just deduct that from how much money we owe. And that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions council might have.
Yeah, Mr. Snyder.
Thank you. One thing I just want to bring up is how connected the slurry seal and street maintenance pieces to the alternative transportation. At that meeting last week, we found out that MTD is close to hitting their 8 millionth rider on an annual basis, which is for an area our size almost unheard of, where it's more comparable to and that's talking about the South Coast of about 200,000 people, but it compares more to cities of 1 million or more. So the ridership is certainly there on the South Coast, and that means that's less riders who are in whatever other vehicle taking up and banging up our own roads. So there's a traffic issue, but there's also a wear and tear issue. So over time, I don't know what the formula is, but there's got to be a connection between the two. When the Measure A item comes next week, I hope we can make sure MTD is at the council session at the hearing, just in case there are questions about it, and just because I know this has come up quite a bit with at various council meetings up on the Mesa. What they're proposing with line 4 is combining it with line 17. Line 17 goes from the transit center through the Lower West Side up to City College, and then it just turns around and goes back. And what they're planning to do is combine 4 and 17. So you have that, you create a loop, one going up Carrillo Hill along Shoreline Drive over to City College, down to the Lower West Side and to the Transit Center, and then the other one going just in the opposite direction. And it's going to be, I think, 15-minute headway, so you can get to the Mesa from the Transit Center one direction or another every 15 minutes, which is fabulous. It also means that if you're at Shifco, which I know is an issue if you want to take the bus, there's a way to get downtown and home without crossing Cliff Drive. You might have to go in a different direction, but if your aim is to get downtown, there's a way to do that, whereas right now there's not, and I know that was a big concern for people at the Shifco area crossing that large street before we take it over. But just really, and I guess and speaking of Cliff Drive, when we get 225 back, then that's going to be a number of miles that then are going to fall under our jurisdiction in terms of maintenance and repair and upkeep and everything else, which is going to be on top of everything else that we're seeing here. And I know when it's relinquished, it'll be in a state of good repair. That has to happen. But eventually, that's going to be something we're going to have to fund somehow. So just the underline how important it is for these two funding sources to remain intact is really important. So thank you for the information.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right. Well, then this will conclude our Finance Committee meeting of May 13th, and we'll see everybody next week. Thank you for being here.